A few weeks have passed since Atsumu's unwanted duet with SakuAtsu and the reveal of who was behind Gemini. After his performance, Atsumu had hoped that SakuAtsu would finally give him his full attention. That SakuAtsu would finally have his eyes only for him. Until she showed up. Sato Kagami, SakuAtsu's ex. And now it wasn't the headlines that showed any other celebrities with SakuAtsu. No, it was fucking Sato Kagami. Megastars spotted together. Dream couple reunited. Are SakuAtsu and Kagami lovers again? Atsumu wanted to vomit. The worst part was that he really didn't know at all what this between him and SakuAtsu was. The curly-haired singer kept him at a distance, yet wanted him back with him the next moment. He rejected him, only to have him back under his covers a few days later. It drove Atsumu crazy. He couldn't go on like this, especially not knowing if SakuAtsu had been with Kagami minutes before, or would go back to her after their little fun time. Kyumi was messing with his mind and it was really wearing Atsumu down. The blonde looked over some preparations for 𝒑𝓷𝓲𝓲𝓷𝓲𝓽𝒂 next concert when suddenly two hands snuck up behind him and embraced his waist, slowly running over his torso. He pressed his lips together, closed his eyes and leaned his head against the strong shoulders behind him, letting the soft lips of the curly-haired man he longed for so much glide over his neck. Hey. How much longer do you have to work? Another hour maybe? I need to go over the plans for your concert. SakuAtsu smirked between the kisses he placed on Atsumu's neck. The blonde fell more and more into a trance. The record labels are fighting to get Gemini signed right now. Have you talked to Osamu yet? SakuAtsu brushed Atsumu's hair at the back of his neck aside and planted soft kisses behind his ear. Atsumu hummed. We're still thinking about it. Guess Suna just has to help out a little too then, huh? SakuAtsu left a bruise into the crook of Atsumu's neck, causing Atsumu's lips to part unconsciously. The blonde was just able to keep himself from vocalizing his pleasure. Stop swaying us, Omi. Atsumu narrowed his eyes, frowned, and tried not to give in to SakuAtsu's desire. Tried to keep him at a distance. Tried not to be engulfed by his touches and kisses. Almost in vain. Almost. Atsumu grabbed SakuAtsu's hands and released his grip from him. He shook SakuAtsu off before he was actually doing things he could regret and moved a few steps away from him, making the raven-haired man pout. He followed Atsumu, not wanting to break away from him. Atsumu leaned against one of the amplifiers and crossed his arms, sighing when he saw Kyumi in front of him. SakuAtsu leaned over him, palms resting on the amplifier next to each of Atsumu's thighs, his nose nudged against the blonde's. Atsumu looked up at him, shining golden eyes meeting the dark haunting ones of his idol, and again, he lost himself almost completely in Kyumi. His heart beat fast, the pink on his cheeks spreading furiously. SakuAtsu hovered over his lips, staring down at them, ready to capture them in his next move. He wanted Atsumu. He wanted him so badly that it frustrated him. Don't you want to go on tour with me? SakuAtsu whispered against Atsumu's lips before actually connecting them in the next moment. He swallowed the blonde's breath, caressed his tongue, and kissed Atsumu like he'd never get enough of him. And Atsumu kissed him back. And back and back and back. Because he too couldn't get enough of SakuAtsu. But it was always like that. When they broke away from each other, Atsumu looked into his face with half-lidded eyes. His lips gleamed from the endless kisses and his arms were wrapped around SakuAtsu's neck. They both panted, wanting more of each other, never able to get enough. But Atsumu closed his eyes and pressed his forehead against Kyumi's before slowly releasing his arms from him and leaning back a bit to meet his eyes and put distance between them. Gemini had been number one in the music business since Atsumu and Osamu's performance. Everyone wanted them. Everyone just had to have them. SakuAtsu wasn't stupid. He knew that. He had sensed that from the beginning. That's why he talked to Bakuto, Kiru and Kenma that if he ever tracked Gemini down, they should sign them. He had found them. All he had to do now was convince them. And that's exactly what he was about to do. SakuAtsu closed the distance and leaned further towards Atsumu, letting his lips flit over the blonde's, feeling his breath. Atsumu huffed out a tiny laugh, shaking his head and biting his lower lip. He turned his head to the side at first, turning away from Kyumi before staring him in the eyes again. It's not fair, Omi. Nothing is fair in war and love, 𝒖�𝒊𝒄. Is that what it was? Love? You know I can't resist you. And Kyumi swept his thumb across his lower lip, clasped his jaw, and tilted his face slightly up at him. Then don't do it. 𝒖𝒂𝒄 whispered against Atsumu's lips, and the blonde hitched his breath, his cheeks drenched in a deep shade of red. Omi. 𝒖𝒂𝒄 kissed him again, more passionately this time, pushing him back until Atsumu leaned his head against the wall and was completely encircled by 𝒖𝒂𝒄. His heart fluttering, heat pooling in the pit of his stomach, he was blown away. Atsumu grabbed 𝒖𝒂𝒄's collar with one hand, pulling him even closer to deepen their kiss before releasing his grip from his shirt, clenching his hand into a fist, and hesitantly, gently punching Kyumi's chest. 𝒖𝒂𝒄 broke away from him and let their mouths linger open against each other, stealing each other's breath, until Atsumu looked up at him. He frowned. Things just couldn't go on like this. He would break. What is this between us? 𝒖𝒂𝒄 frowned and looked down in bewilderment into the golden eyes that had burned him with their blazing flames seconds before, and which were suddenly so small, as if they were going to die at any moment. What? That. This endless back and forth. Sometimes I'm everything to you, sometimes you act like you don't know me. That's not true. It is. And we both know it. 𝒖𝒂𝒄 looked at Atsumu in confusion and took a few steps back, putting a small distance between them. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and met the blonde singer's pained gaze. Is it because you've found out that it was me behind Gemini? Is that why I'm suddenly interesting to you again? 𝒖𝒂𝒄's eyes widened for a split second. No, Atsumu, what? What makes you think that? Am I, Atsumu, even interesting for you? Or are you really just trying to win me over as a singer and can't wait to spend the next hour with Kagami again? 𝒖𝒂𝒄 narrowed his eyes and looked straight into Atsumu's face. Leave Kagami out of this. What? Why? Because you still have a fucking crush on her? Atsumu stood up and took a step towards 𝒖𝒂𝒄, their gazes still locked. Something was brewing inside both 𝒖𝒂𝒄 and Atsumu. Emotions were boiling up and Atsumu was releasing everything that was on his mind. He couldn't take it anymore. He was sick of it. Just because 𝒖𝒂𝒄 is famous doesn't give him the right to act like that. You know, you don't have to do this, Omi. Pretending to feel something for me just to get Gemini signed to you. That was never my intention, 𝒖𝒄𝒄. Oh, shut up. That was exactly what you wanted. Seduce me and then meet up with Kagami again later. Do you think I'm stupid? That I can't see that? We have business together, Atsumu. I would never return to her. Atsumu scoffed. Sure. It's like that. And this? With me? Is it just business, too? What do you want from me, 𝒖𝒄𝒄? Clarity. I want clarity, Omi. I'm tired of being in the dark. I'm tired of being good enough for you when it suits you. Listen, Atsumu, I thought this was fun between us. Didn't you enjoy it too? Atsumu scoffed again. Fun. Maybe it was fun for you. I want more than that. I need more than that, Omi. That's nothing I can give you right now. 𝒖𝒂𝒄 swallowed as he looked into Atsumu's eyes and literally saw something break inside Atsumu. The blonde's eyes flickered, his lips pressed tightly together. Atsumu, hey, I'm not ready for any kind of relationship. At least not yet. He tried to touch him on the shoulders, but Atsumu brushed his arms away from him, took a step back, and tilted his head to the side. He looked visibly hurt. I have too many things going on right now, 𝒖𝒄𝒄. The comeback of our band, the song contest, the upcoming tour. Kagami. 𝒖𝒂𝒄 sighed. Yes, Kagami too. I'd be lying to you if I'd said number. Meaning, you just don't have time for me right now. Atsumu said disappointedly. I wish it was different. 𝒖𝒄𝒄, I don't, Omi. Please just leave me alone. Atsumu turned away from him and crossed his arms, waiting until 𝒖𝒂𝒄 finally left the room. Kyumi clenched his hand into a fist, but immediately unclenched it when he realized that there was no point right now. He walked out of the room without a word, leaving the blonde behind. Atsumu sighed, ran his hand through his hair, and settled down on the couch. He propped his elbows on his knees and buried his face into his palms. My life is a fucking joke. Haikyuu can be pretty confusing, don't be too disappointed. Atsumu peeked out from between his fingers and saw a white-haired beauty standing in front of him, Kagami. Her hair was long and wavy, her eyes ice blue, her skin at least as pale as Kayumi's. Atsumu, right? And yet another megastar that Atsumu would have been better off not coming into contact with. Correct. Kagami entered the room and closed the door. She leaned her back against it and eyed the blonde from head to toe. I overheard your little argument. Sorry, that was probably rude. Atsumu frowned, crossed his arms in front of his chest and leaned back. Kagami chuckled lightly, glancing down at the floor before continuing. Kayumi has always been like that, you know. He would do whatever he wanted. Back then I was in exactly the same situation as you are right now. But you were together, weren't you? Kagami shook her head. Later on, yes. But in the beginning? In the beginning, I was running after him forever, thinking that it was something special between us. But shall I tell you something, Atsumu? In the end, no matter how much he tells you he loves you, the band will always be the most important thing to Kayumi. Atsumu frowned and looked at Kagami with narrowed eyes. He only knew Sakusa's side of the story, so how much truth was there behind Kagami's words? She was saying things that Atsumu could really relate to 100%, but could he believe her? Why would she even tell him that? He wants you, as Gemini, not as Atsumu. Kayumi wants Gemini so that lethargy can benefit from making you big. Believe me, once he has you there, all eyes will be on him again. Every producer, every newcomer will be out to get lethargy, because once again it was them who brought out those megastars. Kagami scoffed. Believe me, Atsumu, I know what I'm talking about. Somehow, this was the complete opposite of what Atsumu had heard. All Atsumu had picked up was that Kagami was out for success. Still, her story sounded plausible. So who was right? Atsumu did not know lethargy that well to judge which side of the story was true and which was not. The next concert you are preparing. Did Kayumi tell you that my band will play a few songs before lethargy starts? Ah, so that's why they've been hanging out so much lately. Why hadn't Sakusa just told him? Atsumu shook his head and Kagami smiled weakly at him. Atsumu, I would be happy if you came to listen to me as well. What was she up to? A month had passed and it was 3 more weeks until lethargy's concert. In the time that had passed, a lot had happened. Sakusa and Atsumu hardly interacted with each other. Either Sakusa was too busy anyway, or Atsumu was rejecting him. He made it clear to him that he wasn't in the mood for all those shenanigans. What Atsumu had never thought, however, was how well he would get along with Kagami during this time. She kept visiting him when she was on business at BKK Records anyway, and as it turned out, she actually wasn't such bad company. They would always make music together, Kagami showing Atsumu a few moves on the piano while Atsumu taught her tricks on the guitar. It was really fun. Little bonus effect, making Sakusa jealous. And Atsumu couldn't help it, because finally he was the one being chased after and not the one who had to keep reaching out for Sakusa. Finally, Atsumu was the one for whom alone Sakusa had his eyes on. Gemini was gaining more and more reputation, but the press didn't really know yet who they were. They often recognized Atsumu as the mysterious man who sang a duet with Sakusa Kayumi. However, they did not know that this man was the lead singer of Gemini. That was until today, when Atsumu and his colleagues were preparing the concert for Kagami's band. BKK Records had insisted on doing this, because lethargy, together with Kagami as the opening act, would have their concert in exactly this concert hall, and Kagami's band would get used to the work of BKK Records. Of course she didn't mind. It would mean that she would see Atsumu, and all the members of lethargy didn't miss her concert either. Thank you guys. Thank you. It was a lot of fun to perform in front of you tonight. You're amazing. Kagami just finished and the crowd cheered. Atsumu was already flashed at lethargy's concert, but the number of people here surpassed that by far. He stood next to the stage and listened to Kagami's concert from there, while Sakusa and his band listened to her from a lounge. Look at me, I'm innocent Kagami. I'm so glad you came, bitch. Remember who made you so big? All of lethargy snickered, except for Sakusa, who was looking at the stage with his arms crossed and his brow furrowed. Don't be so catty, Carver. It's true. She used to pretend to be best friends and now she won't even look at me with her ass? Who does she think she is? There's no point in getting mad at her, so don't. Oh, Kiji-kun, I'm not getting mad at her. I'm the calm one. You'd better be, or you'll get wrinkles. Ikuo gasped. Hajime. Iwaizumi chuckled and pulled Ikuo into a kiss before he could somehow rant any further about Kagami. SakuAtsu didn't let the chatter of his bandmates and friends bother him any further and kept his gaze fixed on his ex. He frowned a bit more now, downright scowling at her as she continued to speak. Before I say goodbye for now, I'd like to introduce you to someone who has really grown on me in the last few weeks. Atsumu, please come here for a moment. SakuAtsu gritted his teeth and Ikuo's eyes widened. Since when? Atsumu hesitantly rushed onto the stage and swallowed. He was visibly uncomfortable. Standing in front of so many people was definitely not what he wanted. He looked frantically into Kagami's eyes and tried to mask his nervousness. Kagami grabbed his hand and turned back to her audience. Atsumu has a hell of a voice. And each of you should check it out. Look for the band Gemini and thank me later. SakuAtsu's and Atsumu's eyes widened. The blonde's brow furrowed. He definitely wasn't ready for that much fame. Heck, he was just a simple man after all. Kagami smiled at him before addressing her final words to her fans. Have at least as much of a good night as I will. Then she pulled Atsumu towards her, swung her arms around his neck and whispered in his ear. Move and I'll ruin your band. I'll make your life a living hell if you don't play along. Atsumu frowned, but before he could ask anything, he felt Kagami's lips on his own. She grasped his jaw, pulling him into a hasty kiss as she let her gaze travel over the crowd and met the dark eyes of SakuAtsu, who was looking at the two of them in sorrow. Who saw them kissing in front of fucking 100k people and Kagami visibly provoked him. She made it. His blood was boiling. Their stares were still fixed on each other, her gaze unwavering. She ran her hand through the waves on the back of Atsumu's head, deepening the kiss until Atsumu managed to gently push her away from him without the fans or anyone on the outside getting a completely wrong picture of them. Kagami pulled Atsumu into a hug, her eyes still fixed on SakuAtsu, who was getting increasingly infuriated. She smirked. This sight was especially pleasing to her. Kagami, what the hell? Sorry Atsumu, you're really a pretty cute boy, but this is my personal war against Kyumi. She broke away from him, cupped his cheeks, and looked into the completely confused eyes of the blonde in front of her. His brow was furrowed, his heart beating hard. Kagami had put on a fake smile and tilted her head to the side. You should never have gotten involved with him, darling. Atsumu hastily spun around, ignoring the raging crowd in front of him and desperately seeking SakuAtsu's gaze. When he found him, everything around him went numb. He swallowed, felt a dryness in his throat, felt as if the air was constricted. He felt sick, so sick, because he knew what Kyumi must be thinking of him at this point. Atsumu was screwed. Kagami had gotten Atsumu into real shit. Not only had she now finally revealed that he was the lead singer behind Gemini, but she had basically destroyed the relationship between him and SakuAtsu. Atsumu could no longer get close to him. Having rejected him so many times before himself, he was now the one completely ignored by Kyumi. SakuAtsu had a totally wrong image of Atsumu. He thought the blonde was no different than Kagami. That he was just using him to get big, that he had thrown himself at Kagami because he noticed that she had a bigger fanbase. Yet everything was completely different. That's exactly what Kagami wanted. She wanted SakuAtsu to think wrong of Atsumu because she hated how in love Kyumi seemed to be looking at him. She wanted to be the one to tell the public whose faces were behind Gemini, so 𝒂𝒔𝒊𝒄 wouldn't get the chance. She didn't care about Atsumu, he was just a means to an end. To put it in Ikuo's words, Kagami was a fucking bitch. She was just finishing her performance when 𝒂𝒂𝒄 was called on stage. 3 weeks had passed and their concert was about to start. Everyone was totally excited as an announcement was made that they would be performing a new song. Atsumu had invited Osamu, partly because the twins still loved their music, and partly because he really needed his brother for emotional support. He had to confront SakuAtsu tonight. This was his only chance to set the record straight. They stood next to the stage, where they were slightly out of the way of the crowd, but still had a perfect view of the band. Atsumu swallowed as his gaze met Kayumi's dark eyes, his heart beating fast and the air caught in his throat. The song started, and even though the hall was packed, everything SakuAtsu was focused on was Atsumu, and Atsumu knew that whatever Kayumi was about to sing, it was meant for him. Only him.
Paint my world a new gray. Pain comes in different shades, slowly rot and decay. Yeah. Lights on me like I'm shooting a movie scene. I be going hard, but you still got a hold on me. And nights like these, take it back, it was you and me. But I can't understand everything you ever told me. Lied in my face on the daily, I'ma go my own way. I don't give a fuck if you hate me, everything you told me. Lied in my face on the daily, I'ma go my own way. I don't give a fuck if you hate me. Yeah. Time to coordinate a chase that I had of you. Yeah. Every day I spent all my time that I had on you. Yeah. Had to drag you underground just so you could see my everyday view. Yeah. Life getting hard, I'm just trying to make it all the way through. Lights on me like I'm shooting a movie scene. I be going hard, but you still got a hold on me. And nights like these, take it back, it was you and me. But I can't understand.
SakuAtsu and Atsumu still kept their gazes locked. Atsuma's entire body shivered.
Everything you ever told me. Lied in my face on the daily, I'ma go my own way. I don't give a fuck if you hate me, everything you told me. Lied in my face on the daily, I'ma go my own way. I don't give a fuck if you hate me.
Atsumu's eyes stung. They filled with tears. He knew it. He knew exactly how SakuAtsu must have thought of him and he couldn't blame him. After everything that had happened in the last few weeks and how the whole thing must have looked like. Atsumu swallowed. His heart almost stopped. He grabbed Osamu's wrist and hurried backstage with him. Atsumu, what the? I have to catch Omi before it's too late.